Hello and a very good evening, everyone. I'm Chris and I welcome you all to another episode of Chai Chatting Community by Word Palette. Tonight I'm going to be talking about marital rape, something that should be talked about more and more often, but is brushed under the carpet. And we will try to know why as I attempt to seek more insight and information from my guests of the hour, Almaas, Abhineet Khankar, and Nayana Bhandari. A very short intro about all of them before we actually jump into the conversation. Almaas is a psychologist. She works with clients from a number of fields such as anxiety, depression, trauma, and of course, domestic abuse. Abhineet is a marketing professional and loves running marathons. And lastly, Nayana. She is a co-founder of Urja Foundation and has been extensively working in the area of community development since 2004. Guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight on this important, very important topic. I can't stress how important it is to have you all on board. Thank you very much. All right, before I actually open the conversation and open the floor with questions, I would like to kind of just establish one thing from my end for all of us who are listening to us, that marital rape exists. It is happening as we speak. No matter what we say or how much blindfolds we put on ourselves or around the society, it's a problem that needs to be addressed now more than ever. So that's one thing I wanted to start the conversation with. Now, probably my first question will be to Nayana. Nayana, you have been working real time with these abuse victims, right? So we want to know your experience with them. What was the basic revelation you had about marital rape while you dealt these individuals on a case-to-case basis?
Welcome everyone, and yeah, I would say that this is such an opportunity to talk about such a vital and important issue. Well, I've been working with victims of family violence, and I can say that I work with majorly with South Asian background, and with the revelation in regards to I would say the the causes of family violence, or often it comes out as financial abuse, emotional abuse, and in the end, at times, victim, they say it's a sexual abuse. So what I have seen while working real time into this issue is that victims, because of a lot of stereotypes, a lot of hesitation, a lot of cultural barriers, they often feel reluctant in coming out and talk about this issue. And it's basically, I would say, if I'm in touch with a victim, and it's a lot of trust which is being involved, leading up to that level where she often disclosed me that she has gone through a big sexual abuse or marital rape throughout, this in relationship. And often I have asked them that what are the reasons which basically stop you coming up and sharing, that bit of your case, because my understanding is that more than everything, this thing plays the biggest wound, and it is so hard to take away, those marks on your heart and body, and it stays with you throughout. So the way the cultural threads has been, I would say, fabricated our society, and even just saying the word that we have been raped by a partner is such a big thing. And I think that is one of the biggest barrier in accepting that. So yeah, this surely exists. And it is quite largely evidently available. So the thing is, it's a big issue, and yes, I think it's good that we are talking about this today.
Thanks, Nayana. Something important that I picked while you were saying that it's the cultural thread, and it's more or less the hesitation and the acceptance of the very fact that you've been mistreated by your own spouse or partner, whatever that may be. I think that's a very important line that needs to be highlighted. We'll come back to that later. But I think the next question is more for Abhineet. Abhineet, welcome, firstly.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone.
Abhineet, now that we all know that a few of the countries from South Asia, they don't want to admit the whole concept of marital rape, right? So as a male perspective, I want to know, what is your take on this? How do you see this issue, and from where do you think this issue stems out, basically?
So when you ask where does this concept come from, or do we actually even acknowledge the concept of marital rape, I would say, and I would take the liberty to paint most of the South Asian men with this brush, that marital rape is an oxymoron. If it's a marriage, why is there a rape? That's the kind of upbringing we have had inadvertently inculcated within all of us. That yeah, that's sex is for granted in the institution of marriage, be it consensual, non-consensual. The moment you're married, that's a given. There's no debates about that. That's number one. And number two, what kind of aids to all of that is, it's not just the men who are definitely, yes, they are the perpetrators of this thing, so yes, they are to be blamed, but yes, to some extent it is the women who have also kind of subconsciously become ingrained in this system, if I can call it, to refuse to as Nayana also called out, to acknowledge the existence that, you know, something like an abuse is actually what it is rather than anything else. And the fact also that probably the burden to make the marriage work and not let it crumble is much more bigger on the woman's shoulders, and it's a stronger reflection on the woman's personality if the marriage breaks rather than the man. So that's where these all these things kind of come together, and that's where we are.
Yeah. It's kind of very supportive, and it's quite a revelation that both of you speak on the same line, that it's equally on the men as well as sometimes on the women, because they are apprehensive of getting out in the open and declaring that, look, this has happened to me, because my marriage will fall apart into pieces, right? So the men are anyway kind of in that air-free condition that nothing is the perpetrator, right? That's interesting, and I'll hold on to that thought while I quickly have a question for Almaas. Almaas, welcome in very first outset. Almaas, a question that I have for you. You've just kind of basically started your career, right? So what goes through your mind while you are talking to these people? Because you're talking to mostly people who are in Melbourne, Australia. So is it as rampant here as in South Asia?
I think to answer that question, I'm going to first make that distinction that in my experience here, working with anyone with any sort of abuse in their background, it is never called what we call it, marital rape. It's always just under this larger umbrella of abuse. And that distinction becomes really important, because if you start to divide different kinds of abuse, you stand to make this mistake of thinking that some abuse is more acceptable than other abuse. But abuse is what it is, just abuse. There isn't a better form of abuse versus a worse form of abuse. And so when we, as a South Asian community, look at any sort of abuse in a marriage, and especially something as horrendous as rape, and we call it marital rape, we stand to almost distinguish it from regular rape, which is still rape nonetheless, still affects people nonetheless. So in my experience, obviously there's no such thing as marital rape in an Australian mindset. There is just domestic abuse, there is domestic violence. And those words make it easier to have a targeted response, because it's like, this is violence, this is abuse happening in a household, needs to be stopped. Whereas within our communities, it's more, if it's marital rape, it's like, well, then we start to come in with, well, what does rape even mean in marriage? If you're married, can it really be rape? And that's when the doubts come in. And as a community, if we make that distinction, we're giving a marriage a higher foothold, I think, in my opinion. I think you start to value marriage as like something that can make an act like rape okay, because it's happening under marriage. And that's what I think goes on with a lot of women before, or when they think about bringing this up ever, is that it's if you pose it to other women, then their marriage feels a bit unsafe, because you're like, no, everything that happens in marriage is okay because it's happening in marriage. And I think that distinction needs to just be done away with. And I can have an entirely different conversation about overhauling the entire institution of marriage, which doesn't fit here. But that's, I think, is where it really comes from, that idea of marital rape versus what we see here of just abuse.
Yeah, yeah. I was kind of doing my prep work last night, and I happened to chance upon a report which says that as of 2020, there were close to 20 to 30 countries that haven't yet criminalized marital rape. So marital rape is not yet considered a criminal offense in those countries, a few of them being in South Asia, right? When asked the higher rungs of societal people that why don't you want to legislate it, their version was, and I quote, that attempts to legislate against marital rape will weaken the concept of marriage and would lead to degradation of societal norms. Now, I want to know all of your views here that are we getting married just so that a woman loses consent? Is that what a marriage has to down to? That I get married to XYZ and I give up my consent. And the moment I stand up, it's considered as wrecking down the societal structure of marriage. So what's going on in the minds of the higher people here? And I'll throw the question open to all of you. I'll start with you first, Abhi.
So my take on that, Chris, is I think especially in our countries, in the South Asian countries, the biggest challenge is the lawmakers or the people who have the authority are not people in sync with the times. When I say that, I'm referring broadly to say the age groups and therefore the kind of the worlds they have grown up with and the worldviews they stick up with. So as a result of that, when they are thinking from this lens that, oh, there is potentially a societal breakdown, because when they bring out such much needed legislations and beyond, well after when they should have been enacted, it is more a reflection of their own views and prejudices coming out. And if you compare the same, and I think that will be something very much common with all the countries in general, which still have not criminalized this thing, because the leadership in general is people of a certain age bracket who cannot identify with a more modern outlook, and they have been brought up on that sense or that worldview of marriage being sacrosanct and let's do whatever it takes to keep everything that happens in the bedroom in the bedroom. So yeah, that's where it is.
Coming on to Almaas and Nayana, because to me it seems as if you're being very biased towards the woman because you're snatching away her right to say anything in the marriage in the first place, right? If I raise voice against my husband, you're just kind of labeling me as a house wrecker and a housebreaker, as Abhineet mentioned earlier on, that the entire thing falls on my shoulder to save it, right? So what do you both think about this? Is it really fair that these countries are not criminalizing just for the fear that women will be more empowered and then they might have to take a backseat? What is your thought on it?
Okay, you go.
Sorry, Nayana, just to open this with, it's not because they're afraid that women will get empowered, it's that they're afraid that men will get disempowered. It's not a thing of we don't want our women empowered. Nobody says that. It's we don't want the men to even lose a fraction of the power they have now. And that is, I think, where it all comes from. Because our societies aren't not female-centric, they're male-centric. It's more important to see who it benefits rather than who it's trying to keep out. And it solely benefits men. And that's what the entire institution of marriage is set up as in South Asian countries. It's so much so that even though I've spent years learning and educating myself on this, there's still a part of me that's like, oh yeah, marriage. Nothing gets done until you get married, I guess. And that's so toxic. It's beaten into you almost from the day that you're born until you get up and you start to have your own thoughts and you're like, wait a second, why am I waiting for this super imaginary thing in my future? And I think that's where it comes from. Sorry, Nayana, you can go ahead.
I totally support you on that one. Nayana, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Abhineet and Almaas has very well mentioned this fact, because we can't underestimate the fact that we are from a very strong patriarchal society, and that patriarchal society is more concerned about how they remain at that seat, at that power, and to keep that maintained, they are happy to sacrifice whatever comes on their way. And women is always been used as a weapon. So gender inequality is universal issue. I mean, we in Western countries, we see that gender inequality is largely being discussed at workplaces, like, political level. But if we say even in our houses, in developing countries, women is still struggling. They've been grown up in a way that kitchen is their kingdom, so they keep on fighting for that kitchen presence.
Yeah.
And the reason is that they want that patriarchal I would say environment won't let them grow out of that area. And it's been told to them, you are the housemaker, that's your area, you have to define your role into it. So lack of education, patriarchal society, gender inequality, and poor leadership. Because if some women, they try to lead out, she's often been character assassination is so strong, whether it's in families or at workplace or in politics, wherever, whatever sphere you talk about. So it's been very well planned in a way that how we can stop a woman to achieve at that level. Because I think we all been created with same bones and skin and same intellectuality. So the men has been just being privileged in past decades, and that's what they are consistently gaining onto. So that's why Abhinit and Almaas, they are saying that women is being considered as second-class citizen. That's the fact.
Agreed.
Yeah,
You mentioned a very... Go on, Abhinit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so so the one thing that I want to call out is, yes, the pace of change, transformation that we expect to come up in our countries today at parity with, say, the West, definitely it's not there. But just to, or throwing some sunshine at it, is the fact that, yes, there are some green shoots coming. We do have some positive changes coming up within our societies in this part of the world. And yes, as of now, it's maybe just restricted to the topmost strata, the most educated ones within our societies. So I hope that's a start. So yeah, just wanted to add that bit on that it's not all doom and gloom as well. But yeah, don't want to take away the seriousness of the matter as well.
But at the same point, if we talk about, coming back to our point of discussion today, marital rape, it has been actually named and come out in origin in 1960s in US, when they say there is a second wave of feminism. So still, it's so many decades of that terminology under progress, and we are still standing there. We are not even acknowledging that fact. I mean, if I say in some of the countries, I can say that even in Australia, 1 in 3 hospitalized sexual assault cases are by their identified spouse or partner. And in India, every day, somewhere around 80 women, they are getting raped. So if we see that tendency, it is very much interlinked. Definitely, there's a big gap in the ratio, big gap in the stats, but there is a prevalence, there is an existence, and definitely there is that environment around which plays such a vital role in getting that happen.
Yeah. Based on what Abhinit said and what you just mentioned, Nayana, I have 2 questions. I'll place them to you guys one by one. The first is, Nayana, early on you mentioned leadership, like a woman is often thrust backwards if she's seen as kind of gaining power. Yeah? What happens in these countries, even if tomorrow we were to kind of legislate few laws which kind of criminalizes marital rape? How can we ensure victim protection? Can we ensure that the victim will be fully protected even if the laws are formulated? What are your thoughts, especially in South Asian countries? Almaas, we'll start with you first. Nayana, go first.
Okay, no, Almaas can go first, yeah.
Well, do you mean like a victim mindset? Or are you talking more from how we look at victims of
how the victim is treated afterward? Because in these countries, what happens is the victim is shamed to no extent. The perpetrator is roaming around freely, but the victim, her family, they are treated like they came down from hell. So how do we ensure that victim is protected?
I think identification is my biggest concern. Every time I've seen within South Asian media, whenever there is a rape of any kind or a passion crime of any kind against a woman, they talk more about the victim than the perpetrator. Whereas there is a lot of research that tells us that the flip is what needs to be done, is you talk about the perpetrator, not the victim. You give the victim complete anonymity because they've gone through a horrendous experience, and the last thing they need is a billion eyes on them. But we almost sensationalize their experience. Media outlets use it as fear-mongering. And we as a society then accept that as a form of secondary shaming. Very subtle, like we're just going to talk about it nonstop, which can be traumatizing to the person who's gone through it, that their experience is being talked about, analyzed, it's just from every angle possible, when all they want to do is possibly heal from it and move on. Whereas the perpetrator is just, anonymous, no names given, no identification given, because they're worried that people might harm that person. And all I can think is like, really, that's what we're concerned about? Something like this has happened, and our concern is, the person who did it, they should be in the eyes of public. People shouldn't go out for public justice, where it's like, well, I don't really care for what happens to the person who's done this.
Exactly.
The empathy is very misdirected.
Before I quickly move on to the next, Nayana, I'd like to have your thoughts on the question, please.
Well, I think I agree. Privacy is confidentiality is not at all valued. A victim is actually victimized further, and perpetrator is always on the side of getting valued and benefited, whether it's by the perpetrator friend or by the society. And in case of a victim, she is actually, my understanding is there is a big fear of reporting in developing countries for the reason of, because they know that after getting reported, their life will definitely going to be in hell. And again, I will always put the pressure on society, because we are the one who are letting that all happen. It's because we never, have compassion, empathy, and never think from a victim's point of view. And that is the pattern which is happening from it.
Agreed. All right. That was great insight. And I'll move on to a very interesting chat that we were having yesterday. And Almaas, I think, raised up this question that why do we define this line between rape and marital rape? So I kind of took the liberty of reading something, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So rape usually happens when someone you know or you might not know, when someone of that stature inflicts physical damage on you, right? But marital rape is mostly spousal rape, and the person you've trusted your life with is kind of inflicting harm and is not taking your no for a no. So in that case, how do we ensure that the societies try to listen where is the line being drawn? Why is rape still given importance, but why is there no such importance or light given to marital rape? And now I'll start with you first.
So my take on that, Chris, is a rape is essentially something that happens without consent, and that applies to marital rape as well. So consent, or the awareness, the education about consent, is something very critical in our societies. And as we kind of touched upon earlier, once you're in the institution of marriage, consent is taken for granted. And in a lot of cases, in marital rape, all these cases, that's where it mostly stems from, that aren't we married? So where does the question of rape come from? So educating everyone, more so the men, about the importance of consent, even within the institution of a marriage, in my perspective, would be one of the first things to start off with.
Agreed. Almaas, Nayana, any thoughts before we kind of move on? Because I'm mindful of the time now.
I actually want to add something that was really interesting to me when you were posing this question, Chris. I remember that you said that, it's done from your spouse, somebody that you trust your life with. And I really want to focus on the trust your life with, because that already reflects the way South Asians are cultured into marriage. It's you're trusting your life with. When is that really marriage? Are you really trusting your life? Or is this somebody that you are deciding to partner with, ideally for the rest of your life? But it's somebody you've decided to partner with to get through life together, Whereas trusting your life. And that's the way we're socialized, right? That's the way we're taught about marriage. It's so ingrained. We don't catch ourselves saying and thinking those things. And so, and we're all really privileged here as we speak about this, right? And so now I'm thinking of people not as privileged, not having as much access to education, and how difficult it must be for them to identify, first of all, that this is what's happening for them, and almost brainwashing of sorts that places marriage at the highest pedestal of their existence. And then making that distinction between if somebody assaults me, and I also want to focus on what it feels like after you've been raped. Any sort of assault, what it leaves women with, and I'm sure Nayana probably has a lot of experience hearing this more than I do, but that feeling of powerlessness and helplessness, and then you compound that with the thought of, well, I've, like you said, trusted this person with my life. How must you be feeling as a victim? I don't think I can imagine that, and I don't think anyone can unless they've actually experienced it. And we effectively, I think, as unfortunate as it is, we make women powerless when we send them into marriages. We are essentially making them powerless. The language around marriage, what it means for you, what it means for the male in the marriage, and how we don't think that the male is trusting his life with you. And what is that about, right? Like it's the.
Can I just add? Sorry to interrupt you, Almaas,
No,
but
yeah.
this is. Maybe because I believe in institution of marriage, and I do respect, because I have seen very successful marriages around, and I thoroughly understand, this concept of marriage. And what my understanding is that definitely, like any other relationship, it is equal. There is equality. That relation is beautiful. Like, having a companion of your choice with you and spending your life with that partner or person. So the concern under my consideration is the fantasy for that marriage. Like, especially with the girls, how they've been brought up by the families. I mean, their parents, the minute they found out that a girl child is there, they start saving the money for the wedding. This is appalling. This is shocking. And I always like to say, use that money for your daughter's education. If she is educated, if she can build her career, there's no point she will ever going to lead into a bad life. So don't use that money.
Yeah, what message do we send girls when we tell them, well, this is money that I'm saving up for the rest of my since the day you were born, but it's actually for your marriage, nothing else. You can't use it how you wanted to.
I think the essence of it starts with the fact when we are told that this house is not yours. Your house is somebody else.
Good God.
You restrain a girl to fully bloom as an individual by giving her that constant reminder, you will going to get married to another person's. You are going to live in another house. Imagine that, emotional setback every day a girl goes through.
And conversely, we tell boys that they own the house they live in, they have the ownership, they are the owners. So as an owner, it's easy for me to think I can do whatever I want in the four walls of my house and get away with it because, well, I live here. This is my house. Men feel this level of intrinsic safety in their relationships, in their homes, in their families that women are never feeling at any point. So obviously one's going to be the victim.
It's coded into their mindset, Almaas, that you are a boy. You are the king. You're meant to be served. Someone who's coming in is just meant to serve you. They can't imagine the opposite, that you are serving the woman. Hell no, it's not allowed. What are you doing? You're crazy, right?
It's a big shift. It's a big shift of thinking, actually, which is, I would say, need of the time. But, people often say, oh, it will take ages. I do agree, but we need to get started from somewhere.
And I also think, sorry, Nayana, keep going.
So often I've been get in touch with girls, and they very openly tells me that they can live here in Australia in whatever condition they are, but they can never go back to their country because they can't deal with that shame. They can't deal with that questions by the society. So they're not worried about what they themselves are going through at social, emotional, financial level, but they're so much concerned about the way society will going to look at them as they are victims.
Yeah.
I'll take the liberty. I know Abhineet has been quiet for a long time. I'll come to you, Abhineet, but I'll take the liberty of recounting a very small incident. I had this friend, she got married. And this is back in the 2010 or 12, something around that time. And she was pregnant. So she was in the first trimester, and her husband was coming to see her. Husband was overseas, so he has come down to see her. The next day, I see her walking with a limp. And I was concerned because she was in the first trimester. I wasn't sure what happened. And I asked, what happened? Initially, she was very hesitant to actually tell me what happened. And then later, when she had the confidence, she tells me, you know what, I had to give in to my husband's demands last night, although it was paining like anything. And I was, why did you have to say yes to him? And she says, no, he met me after 3 months. I didn't want to make him sad. That one line was appalling, and I was shocked that how can you do this to yourself and the future child? How can you torture just because your husband is not happy? So my reason for sharing this is the impression we are kind of always conditioned with. Make your husband happy, make your man happy. He should be satisfied, and that's how your marriage is safe. I mean, any closing words from you before we kind of start wrapping up?
No, so I would say totally agree with all of that. And and where we are kind of stuck is, say, in terms of our popular culture, popular narratives, we kind of still keep on going in these circles. And be it the kind of content we consume as a society on television or even in movies, that always so and when I talk of consent for that matter, not just say with respect to having sex, but say the guy chasing the girl in a movie, consent is not really factored in ever in those plots and things like that. So that is something which is yes, marital rape is there, but that stems from this much larger issue we have within our societies of patriarchy and everything that stems out from that. So,
Guys, I have one question when I was listening to you that came up in my mind, and it's for all of you. Like, we have subjected women as also being somewhere the reasons why it's still not being talked about, right? What about the mothers and the mother-in-laws? Like, for example, I reach out to Almaas saying, Mom, this is happening to me, hypothetically. And my mom indirectly tells me, look, whatever happens, this has to stay behind closed doors. Make it work. We don't care. Our prestige is on the line. How do we deal with our own mothers who, knowing fully well, they might have gone through the same situation, but they are not ready to support the daughters? How do we deal with that situation? Nayana, we'll start with you.
Well, there are a few ways I would suggest, because I've been working at grassroots level from, I would say, almost 10 years by now. And I do work a lot with grandmothers and mothers and mother-in-law, sister-in-law. So I would say that all spread from young to the older level. And what I found that how often do we all sit in a group and come up with these kind of discussions? How often? Like, we need to, as a women, need to change our shift of mind from dresses and cooking and those traditional discussions. We need to move from that side towards how we can support each other, how we can look after each other. We don't believe in, mindfulness. We don't believe in self-care. We need to start valuing ourselves. We need to let our mother remind that you please look after yourself. Same goes to our daughter. So, we've been in a regular cycle and process of not being looked after by ourselves and by the society. And that's the reason we are getting completely tarnished in so many different ways. So respect yourself, respect your ladies at home, in your friend circle, value them, listen to them, communicate with them. That is the best starting point from my observation.
Absolutely agree. And I think probably the last question for the evening to all three of you. For all those countries who are still in the process, who haven't criminalized this offense yet, how do we raise awareness? What is the one way, or what are the ways of raising awareness in these countries? I'll start with Almaas, and then we'll go with Nayana and Avin.
My question is very about self. So within yourself, really making that change. I think first of all, it's unlearning some of the, I'll use the word toxic instead of some other fashionable word choices I might have, but some toxic family values that we're taught in our cultures. You can love your family and still disagree and know that they're harmful for you and what they're telling you is not good for you. Making that shift is going to make it okay for you to actually go out there and advocate for something. And going off of what Nayana added is first starting in your private circles of not tolerating any level of abuse coming from anyone in a partnership position and pushing on to marriage, family, in-laws. But it really starts with me. And am I speaking? Because if I know that there's something happening to my friend or in my own family, and I go about and advocate it in public, that's a bit hypocritical. So really just, can I even talk to people that I know about this? Because if I can't do that, I'm not going to be able to make any large social change. And that requires an uncomfortable conversation with yourself about who in your family is actually good for you and giving you the right values versus who's actually operating from just being blindly following values that they were given. And our mothers unfortunately fall into that category. I'll be the first to say it. I know that my mother does. And I know she loves me and cares for me, but I know that her values are not in align, are not very well aligned with a good life.
Agreed. Nayana, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that every person is a change maker, and everyone carries a capacity to bring that change. And in whatever capacity, where you are sitting, what you can do, just do it. Don't look out for powers. Don't look out for people to listen you. If you are so much in touch or worried about any certain social issue, just raise your voice. Be vocal about it, talk about it, don't hesitate. If you believe it so much from your heart that this is something happening wrong, just talk about it.
Awesome. Charity begins at home. Great. Abhineet, your thoughts?
Yes, fully agree with the two women, whatever they said right now. What I would just want to add from my perspective or my understanding is in our societies, a lot of, and as we kind of captured earlier in this chat as well, is that a lot of stuff or the hesitation to confront the issue stems from the fact, log kya kahenge, what will the world say? So as a society, if we start valuing ourselves or putting ourselves in the center of our universe, so if I am the center of my universe and I'm not happy, not feeling safe, secure in a given environment, then I should walk out to a better environment, or at the very least walk out of this one for sure without worrying about the world. So that's more of a societal, cultural mindset change. And if we have that, then not just this, we can, we'll be better off on a lot other issues as well. So
Agreed. I think we need to stop branding divorces as shame and, people who are divorced are like bound to die. No,
exactly.
they need to live a better life rather than get suffered in their life by misery. Awesome.
Can I just quickly at one point sorry, Almaas.
No, go ahead, Nayana. Go ahead.
As we are talking about, how we can bring the change and how we can talk, about all these issues existing in our society, I believe that whether it's this issue or any other issue, we need equal presence of male and female. If we keep on empowering women all the time, it will never be achieved. Because in the end, we want harmony in family, and that can only be achieved if we work with both the genders equally and at the same time. So I think that if we are talking about gender inequality or women empowerment, let's talk about having them together.
Perfect. Noted. Beautiful. Almaas, your words.
Okay, along the same lines, but I also wanted to add that for a lot of South Asian men, when they're finally in an even relationship or when they're heading towards a more even spousal relationship, it's going to feel like inequality. It's going to feel like your power is being taken away. So when men feel that, instead of going, I'm going to do everything I can to bring this under control, it's about learning to let go of that power. And which is why I say this nonstop. I'm just like, everyone needs therapy, especially every man. Just everyone needs that space where they can really open up about their insecurities, because men operate a lot from insecurity, especially in their romantic relationships. So that's something that men have to take away and think about, really.
I think we need to have a whole different conversation about South Asian relationships and the dynamics people have there.
Exactly.
All right, I think we need to wrap this up. This was great, guys. Thank you for making up time for this. But before we roll out, Nayana, do you have any hotline numbers to share with our listeners? Anything that will help people?
Yeah, well, I can definitely, because this is a heavy discussion. So, if someone is feeling a need to talk, please go and dial 1800 Respect. It's a 24 hours counseling service. And if someone is at the verge of, like, getting family violent or having that environment at home, please contact 000 and call police, because I believe that someone might feel a pressure at this point of time. And there are so many helplines. You can go to Safe Step, In Touch, which thoroughly work for ethnic women support services. So Google it. You will find a lot of services. You can get back to Chris, and you can write down, I think, in the question box if you have any inquiries, and we are happy to take those questions and inquiries, and would love to get back to the people who really need help in any way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for doing this. And I hope listeners take away something meaningful from the conversation we have had. And I would like to reiterate one thing again, that marital rape is prevalent. Please talk about it. Don't brush it under the carpet. That's all we need right now. And on that note, I would like to wrap up. And thank you, everyone. And I'll see you soon with another episode.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.